The Grand Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for announcing the discovery of a new deadly virus, or the accidental deletion of the universe's greatest cat video collection. Representatives from over 300 species shifted uncomfortably in their ergonomically designed seats, which, ironically, weren't actually comfortable for any of them. "Order! Order in the chamber!" High Councillor Vextillion banged his ceremonial gravity hammer, which was really just a fancy stick with some lights on it. The chamber fell into what could generously be called silence, if you ignored the constant whirring of life support systems and that one Mercurian delegate who couldn't stop clicking their mandibles. Zixathor, the youngest junior diplomat in the history of the Galactic Council, mostly because nobody else wanted the job, sat in the far corner trying to look important while simultaneously attempting to disappear into their chair. It wasn't going well on either front. "We are gathered here today," Vexatillion continued, his 7 eyes blinking in sequence, "to discuss the human problem." The chamber erupted in murmurs, whispers, and whatever that sound was that the gaseous species made when they were agitated. Probably just gas, Zixathor mused. "Specifically," the High Councillor pressed on, their continued refusal to behave in any way that makes logical sense. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing various human activities. A human eating something called a ghost pepper while their friends cheered. Another human jumping out of a perfectly functional atmospheric vehicle for fun. A third human trying to pet something called a murder hornet. "Just last week," a Rigelian delegate chimed in, their crystalline form sparkling with indignation, "a human diplomatic team responded to our formal trade agreement with something called a meme. It was a picture of what they call a cat with poorly spelled text." Zixathor had to stifle a laugh. They'd seen that meme. It was actually pretty good. "And let's not forget," added Ambassador Cleaton of the Silicon Consciousness, "their bizarre habit of responding to serious questions with something called sarcasm. How are we supposed to maintain diplomatic relations with a species that says the opposite of what they mean and expects us to understand?" The chamber descended into chaos again, as various delegates shared their human horror stories. Zixathor listened with growing amusement as one after another, sophisticated alien diplomats complained about humanity's confusing ways. They put milk in beans and call it coffee. They invented thousands of languages but still communicate primarily in small pictures called emojis. One of them told me to break a leg before an important presentation. I still haven't figured out if that was a threat. Zixathor watched as the Council, the supposed pinnacle of galactic civilization, collectively lost their minds over humanity's unpredictability. The funny thing was, in their brief interactions with humans, Zixathor had found them rather straightforward. Sure, they were weird, but at least they were consistently weird. Unlike the Council, which pretended to be logical while acting just as irrationally as any human. The young diplomat settled in for what promised to be a very long, very entertaining session. At least they'd brought snacks. Those human things called Doritos that the Council had officially banned but everyone secretly imported anyway. But then Ambassador Cleaton brought up the incident, and the chamber fell into a horrified silence. It had happened during the first official diplomatic breakfast between humans and the Galactic Council. Everything had been going smoothly until High Councillor Vexatillion, in an attempt to show cultural appreciation, had commented on the traditional human morning beverage. "Ah, yes, coffee," he had said, his translator working overtime to convey his enthusiasm. The ritual of crushing the offspring of sacred plants, boiling them in water, and then adulterating the resulting liquid with the mammary secretions of other species. Truly, humans are masters of sophisticated cuisine. The human representatives had frozen mid-sip. One of them had slowly lowered their mug, looking at the High Councillor with an expression that the alien diplomatic corps' cultural database would later classify as, "Are you kidding me right now?" But it got worse. Vexatillion, encouraged by what he interpreted as attentive silence, had continued. "And these flat circles of coagulated grain particles and liquid chicken embryos, topped with tree blood, simply magnificent." He had gestured enthusiastically at the pancakes with maple syrup. The human's expressions had shifted from mild annoyance to something the database struggled to categorize, eventually settling on pending thermonuclear reaction. "Tree blood," one of the humans had said, in that peculiar tone they used when they were about to say something that meant the exact opposite of what they were actually saying. "Please tell us more about our sophisticated cuisine. We're dying to hear your thoughts on hot dogs." Zixathor, who had been present as a junior note-taker, had immediately recognized the danger signs. The slight eye twitch, the overly polite smile, the drumming fingers, all classic indicators of imminent human sarcasm. But before they could intervene, Vexitilian had launched into a detailed analysis of the misnamed Earth delicacy, completely oblivious to the diplomatic disaster unfolding before him. The breakfast had ended with the humans introducing the Council to another Earth tradition, the spit take. Following the breakfast incident, the humans responded in the most terrifying way possible, with excessive politeness. "Oh no," Zixthor muttered during the next council session, watching as human diplomatic gifts were brought in. "They've gone full passive-aggressive." The gifts started innocently enough. A comprehensive guide to Earth cuisine, complete with detailed molecular analysis of every ingredient. A collection of coffee beans from around the world, each packaged with a 200-page report on their cultivation methods. And the pièce de résistance. A ceremonial maple tree sapling, accompanied by a handwritten note that read, "For all your tree blood needs, XOXO humanity." High Councillor Vexitilian beamed with pride. "See? They're taking our cultural exchange seriously." Zixathor face-palmed, a human gesture they'd picked up that seemed particularly appropriate for moments like these. The Council's complete inability to detect human sarcasm would have been amusing if it weren't actively destroying galactic diplomacy. The trade negotiations that followed were a masterclass in miscommunication. The humans proposed a modest exchange. They would share their coffee-making technology in return for just a few faster-than-light drive cores. "What a reasonable request," Ambassador Cleaton had declared. "They only want a few." "They want 17,000, Zixthor pointed out. "Yes, but they asked so nicely." The humans' next proposal involved trading some simple cooking recipes for access to the Council's quantum computing network. They delivered this request while serving something they called Swedish surströmming in the Council chamber, causing 3 species to evacuate the room and 1 gaseous delegate to solidify in shock. "Look how they're sharing their culture!" Vexitilian exclaimed through his emergency breathing apparatus. "Such enthusiasm!" Zixathor watched in horror as the Council approved trade deal after trade deal, completely missing the humans' increasingly obvious sarcasm. Earth's diplomatic corps had mastered the art of asking for outrageous things while maintaining perfectly pleasant smiles. The situation reached its peak during the annual Galactic Cultural Exchange Festival. The humans hosted a cooking demonstration they called How to Properly Appreciate Alien Cuisine. They prepared traditional council delicacies with exaggerated reverence, describing each dish in the same manner Vexitilian had described their pancakes. "And here we have the Rigelian crystal flakes," the human chef announced, wearing a smile that could cut diamond. "Ah, yes, the crushed remains of deceased mineral-based life forms, arranged artistically on fossilized plant matter. Truly sophisticated." The Rigelian delegates sparkled with pride, completely missing how the human audience was trying desperately not to laugh. "They're mocking us," Zixathor tried to explain to the Council. "This is revenge for the breakfast incident." "Nonsense," Vexitilian replied. "They're simply being thorough in their cultural analysis. Look, they even created a presentation about our ceremonial gravity hammers. Fancy sticks with lights, a deep dive into Galactic Council traditions." Zixathor watched as the trade negotiations devolved into what the humans would call a passive-aggressive potluck. Each side tried to outdo the other in problematic cultural interpretations, while maintaining absolutely perfect diplomatic courtesy. The humans began serving coffee with every meal, introducing increasingly bizarre varieties. "This is our new blend, triple-shot quantum paradox roast. It's made from beans grown in zero gravity and blessed by theoretical physicists. We thought you'd appreciate the scientific approach to our sacred plant offspring." The council responded by trying to show their appreciation for human culture in increasingly misguided ways. They started ending every session with group jumps from their floating platforms, declaring it a tribute to human recreational falling. They installed coffee makers that launched the beans into low orbit before grinding them, claiming it enhanced the ritual significance. Meanwhile, actual diplomatic progress ground to a halt as both sides became locked in an escalating cycle of aggressively polite cultural exchange. The humans kept finding new ways to serve pancakes, each time with increasingly elaborate tree blood varieties, while the council continued to miss every single hint that they were being teased. And somewhere in the background, Zixathor started stockpiling comfort food. They had a feeling things were about to get much, much worse. The council's first hint that something was terribly wrong came during a routine scan of human space. The quantum sensors picked up what could only be described as a dimensional hiccup. If dimensional hiccups involved screaming faces in the void and the faint sound of heavy metal music. "Fascinating," muttered Dr. Pixtel, the council's lead xenophysicist, who had clearly never watched a human horror movie. "Their planet appears to be intersecting with some kind of parallel dimension." Zixathor, who had indeed watched human horror movies, for cultural research purposes of course, was significantly more concerned. "Perhaps we should ask the humans about this before we—" But it was too late. The council had already dispatched their finest research vessel to investigate what they called an interesting spatial anomaly, and what humans would have called a really bad idea. The research team's first report was professional and enthusiastic. Dimensional breach located, beginning detailed scans. Their second report was slightly less professional. "Are those flames supposed to be that color?" Their third report consisted entirely of screaming and what sounded like demonic laughter. The council chamber erupted into panic. Well, dignified panic. The kind of panic where everyone is still technically following parliamentary procedure, but with much more nervous tentacle wringing than usual. "Order!" Vexatillion shouted, banging his gravity hammer so hard it actually affected gravity this time. "We must approach this scientifically. Clearly the humans have some explanation for why their planet intersects with a dimension of eternal torment." That's when the human diplomatic team walked in, carrying what appeared to be gift baskets. "Oh, you found our hell portal," one of them exclaimed cheerfully. "We were wondering when you'd notice that. Coffee?" The silence in the chamber was broken only by the sound of several delegates' exoskeletons creaking as they stared. "Your hell portal," Vexatillion repeated slowly. "Yep." The human diplomat smiled brightly. "You know how some species evolve alongside oceans or mountains or extreme radiation? Well, we evolved alongside a dimensional breach to hell. Really builds character. Would anyone like a muffin? They're cinnamon-flavored." The council's cultural database simultaneously updated and crashed as it tried to process this information. "Are you saying," Ambassador Cleaton began carefully, "that your species developed while in constant contact with an interdimensional realm of damnation?" "Pretty much. Makes for some interesting holiday traditions. You should see our Halloween parties." The research team, having finally been retrieved, minus some equipment that had mysteriously melted, provided their report. According to their findings, Earth's hell dimension contained lakes of fire, unusually good for barbecues according to human notes, eternal torment, which humans had apparently turned into an extreme tourism opportunity, demons, with whom humans had established trade relations primarily involving hot sauce recipes, the damned souls of the wicked, who were apparently excellent jazz musicians. But this defies all logic," Dr. Pixatil protested. "How do you survive with such a thing on your planet?" The human diplomatic team exchanged amused glances. "Oh, we don't just survive. We've got a timeshare arrangement. Do you know how good Hell's thermals are for renewable energy?" That's when the council finally began to understand. All those human idioms that had confused them for years suddenly made horrible sense. When hell freezes over, because humans had installed air conditioning, highway to hell, an actual infrastructure project, deal with the devil, apparently filed under standard business contracts in human bureaucracy. Hot as hell. A literal temperature comparison. Is this why, Zixathor asked, things finally clicking into place, humans are so human? What, you mean our tendency to laugh in the face of danger, treat every warning as a challenge, and respond to cosmic horror with sarcasm? The human grinned. Having a hell dimension in your backyard really puts things in perspective. Did you know demons are terrible at understanding sarcasm too? Makes diplomatic meetings really entertaining. The council sat in stunned silence as the humans proceeded to lay out their proposal for interdimensional cultural exchange programs. They had pamphlets and everything. Just think of the possibilities, the human diplomat enthused. Hell tourism, extreme sports packages, authentic demon-approved spicy food festivals. We've already set up a pilot program. The demons are particularly interested in your gravity hammers. Something about innovative torture techniques. Vextillion clutched his hammer protectively. Of course, the human added with a smile that was just a bit too wide. This would help us forget all about that unfortunate breakfast incident. Nothing like a little interdimensional trade to smooth over cultural misunderstandings about tree blood, right? Zixathor watched as understanding finally dawned on the council's collective faces. The humans hadn't been sharing their Hell Dimension information as a peace offering. This was the diplomatic equivalent of saying, "You think we're weird? You haven't seen anything yet." "We'll need time to consider this proposal," Vextillion managed to say. Of course. Take all the time you need. We'll just leave these pamphlets, and this complimentary bottle of hell-brewed hot sauce. We call it Council's Breakfast Special." As the human delegation left, Zixathor couldn't help but admire their style. They had managed to turn even their planet's eldritch horror into a diplomatic power play. The council chamber remained quiet for a long time after that, broken only by Ambassador Cleaton's whispered question. Should we tell them we've noticed their connection to something they call Florida? No, the entire council shouted in unison. They had learned their lesson about investigating human anomalies. Some things were better left alone. The turning point in human-council relations came from, of all things, a maintenance accident. During a routine cleaning of the council chamber, someone had accidentally activated both the gravity hammer collection and the coffee makers simultaneously. The resulting chaos had covered half the delegates in high-velocity coffee, while the other half floated helplessly near the ceiling. And the humans laughed. Not meanly, but with the kind of genuine mirth that came from seeing something genuinely funny. Then, to everyone's surprise, they helped clean up, sharing stories about their own mishaps with gravity and hot beverages. "You know," said one human diplomat while helping a floating Regellian down from a chandelier, "we're not actually mad about the breakfast thing anymore. We just couldn't resist messing with you a little." "A little?" Zixathor asked, wringing coffee out of their ceremonial robes. "Okay, a lot," the human admitted. "But you have to admit, the tree blood thing was pretty funny." And suddenly, unexpectedly, Vextillion laughed. Actually laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that made his 7 eyes water. It was, wasn't it? Almost as funny as your hell-brewed hot sauce labels. Guaranteed to make demons cry? Really? "Oh, that part wasn't a joke," the human said cheerfully. "We had to include warning labels after the incident with the demon choir." That broke the last of the tension. Soon the council chamber was filled with something it had never experienced before. The sound of multiple species sharing jokes, pranks, and embarrassing stories. The Regellians shared tales of their crystalline ancestors accidentally refracting light shows during serious ceremonies. The Silicon Consciousness admitted to occasionally sending spam emails for fun. Even the gaseous delegates contributed with stories about unfortunate wind currents during formal events. "So wait," an Arcturian delegate asked. "Humans don't actually have a timeshare arrangement with Hell?" "Oh no, that part's real," the human replied, sipping their coffee. "We just oversold it a bit. It's more like having really dramatic neighbors who are way too into metal music and spicy food." Cultural exchange took on a new meaning after that. Instead of trying to impress or intimidate each other, both sides started sharing their genuine quirks and foibles. The council learned that human sarcasm wasn't meant as a weapon, but as a way of dealing with absurdity, something they had plenty of experience with themselves. The humans, in turn, learned to appreciate the council's unintentionally hilarious attempts at formality. They particularly enjoyed the gravity hammers, once they realized they were literally just fancy sticks with lights, like fancy drum majors in space, one human had exclaimed to much confusion. The Grand Galactic Council's official guidelines for dealing with humans became the most entertaining document in bureaucratic history. Written collaboratively by both humans and aliens, it quickly became a bestseller across 3 galaxies. Key excerpts included: Rule 1. When a human says, "What's the worst that could happen?" Evacuate immediately. Rule 17. Coffee is sacred. Tree blood, maple syrup, is sacred. The combination is exponentially sacred. Pack snacks accordingly. Rule 23. If a human tells you to break a leg, they are usually not threatening you. Unless you're in Hell's community theatre program, in which case all bets are off. Emergency Protocol 5. In case of excessive human sarcasm, deploy memes immediately. Warning: may result in escalating GIF warfare. The first annual Intergalactic Comedy Festival became the crowning achievement of this new understanding, hosted jointly on Earth and in Hell. The demons had insisted on co-hosting, mainly because they wanted to try their hand at stand-up comedy. During the closing ceremony, a human diplomat and a demon performed a comedy duo routine about cultural misunderstandings, while council members provided musical accompaniment with their gravity hammers, and the gaseous delegates created special effects with their natural abilities. As Zixithor, now promoted to Senior Director of Human Relations, watched this beautiful chaos unfold, they overheard a conversation between 2 beings who would have once been mortal enemies. "What do you call a demon who tells dad jokes?" the human asked. "I don't know, what?" replied the demon, already grinning with all 3 mouths. "A hilarious guy." The groan that echoed across dimensions was probably the first time in history that humans, aliens, and demons had all united in collective facepalming. The official recordings of that day end with a note that became the unofficial motto of human galactic relations. In a universe full of wonders and horrors, sometimes the best diplomacy is just learning to laugh together. Even if that laughter occasionally sounds like screaming and comes with a side of hellfire. And somewhere in the council archives, next to the original breakfast incident report, there's a coffee-stained addendum that simply reads, "Maybe they're not so bad after all, but we're still not trying their hot sauce. The end." Though rumors persist about the humans' connection to something called Florida, some mysteries, the council decided, were better left unexplored.